Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Turn Left. I am your host, Indiana's own Dana Black, coming to you live, yes, all the way live from Black Pearl Studios, where we talk about Indiana politics from the left side of things. Man, the Senate has been a mess this week. My heart is breaking. All the bills, all the, anti-freedom bills that are coming out. You see, I got my man JD behind me. Y'all make sure y'all support JD Ford. He is our lone LGBTQ plus voice in our state house, and we need to make sure we send him back, because between him and the other 10 senators we have in a 50-person body, they do everything they can to fight for us and regular everyday people. But with them being in a super minority, we know a lot of the legislation that is harmful to trans kids, LGBTQ plus youth, African American students, just name a marginalized group. They're going to pass that legislation because, sensitive white folk, I'm just going to say that. But tonight, I am not going to do a rant. No. This whole hour is going to be chucking it up with two of the coolest people in the state. First up, my guy. I met him when he ran for Congress in District 9 a few years back. I was so grateful I did not have to vote in that primary because there were two top-notch candidates. I tell you what, he showed up, showed out, and we have been connected ever since. Y'all give it up for my man, Dan Canon. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It has been far too long. I have not done the show since that campaign.
I know, but you
It
know
seems
what?
like 400 years ago.
Don't say that. Well, I'm aging well then, sure. And I gotta say, one thing that you did after that primary that a lot of people aren't aware of, which I wish some of our other folks would kind of get on board with that. You were quick to support the primary winner. You did some fundraising together. You did some days of action together. I thought that was classy, class act. And, I always will tip my hat to that. I know you wanted to win, but you showed up and showed out for the winner. And I applaud you for that. You will always be one of my favorite people.
Well, thank you. And the feeling is mutual. I wish it would have helped us win the general.
I know,
But
right?
here we are.
All right,
Yeah.
here we are. And I figure like this. If Mika and Joe can be on Morning Joe every morning, yucking it up, then me and Nicole can do a show together every now and then. The privilege of owning your own show. Y'all give it up for the Honorable Nicole Bolden, Bloomington City Clerk, and a whole bunch of other titles. Nicole, welcome back to the show, boo.
Thank you so much for having me on tonight. I'm so excited to talk to you and Dan about his upcoming book and everything else. So this is great. And we can talk a little bit about the Monroe County Black Democratic Caucus also, if you want to hear about it.
Absolutely. But first up, Dan, you're published. You got a
It
whole
looks
book,
that
my
way.
man.
It
Well,
looks that way. Yeah.
tell us about Pleading Out. What is this book about?
Well, it's about plea bargaining in America. And so the question naturally arises of why would I read an entire book about plea bargaining in America? And really what the book is, first of all, it's very entertaining, just fantastic. You can trust me because I'm a guy that normally wears elbow patches. I don't have them tonight, but you can tell that if somebody wears elbow patches on a regular basis, they are worthy of your trust. And I'm telling you, it's very entertaining. But the other thing is that it's a primer on everything that's wrong with the criminal justice system, and that sounds like a whole lot to tackle in one book, and it is. But I do it by looking at everything through the lens of plea bargaining, which is sort of this common thread that runs through everything. So policing and prosecution and the judges that we have on the bench and their sort of permissiveness to let prosecutors do whatever they want, and mass incarceration and the whole ball of wax. And plea bargaining runs through all of that. And it's one of those things that you look at the American criminal justice system, and I think most of us recognize that it's in a terrible state of disarray. It's a hideous mess. And you look at the systems in the rest of the world, and you say, well, most of those are not quite the mess that we have here. Nobody's incarcerating as many people as we are. And most, developed countries don't treat their people that have been convicted of crimes nearly as badly as
Right?
we do. And so, you can also see that the way that we approach plea bargaining here is dramatically different than the rest of the world. So, for instance, 97% of our criminal cases resolve via plea bargaining. Somewhere in the 90s, and that number is actually going up all the time. Well, nobody
Mm-hmm.
else does that. Nobody else in the whole world does that. So the book breaks down why that is, and what happens if we start to pull on that thread a little bit, and cut back the amount of plea bargaining that we are actually allowing, and I think that ultimately comes to the conclusion that even just a little bit of a reduction in the amount of plea bargaining that we're doing, it can make a big difference in people, like ordinary people can actually effectuate those differences and not have to depend on, for example, a horrible state legislature to do something that's in the best interests of people.
I love
So
it.
that's what the book.
And I love it. I'm so glad that you are out here making it happen. So tell us what happened. What kind of light bulb moment did you have that you said, I got to write this book? I need to educate people.
Well, it came from a lot of batting around a lot of different ideas with a literary agent and trying to figure out, what's a good niche and what's going to happen. So I was fortunate enough to, I published a thing about the nightmare of immigration courts years ago, a couple of years ago now, 5 years ago maybe, in Slate.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result of that, I was fortunate enough to be contacted by this literary agent in New York, who's the real deal, and sort of sucked me into this whole world of stuff that I didn't know anything about. Like I'm just sort of this casual Twitter user that writes blog posts sometimes, and she's like, "Well, have you thought about writing a book?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know what to write about." So we bounced around ideas for a while, and eventually, came up with this. And as the more I dug into the subject material, the more I became convinced that the widespread use of plea bargaining is essentially a tactic, one of many tactics used to perpetuate class divisions in the United States. And that starts to sound a little bit more interesting than just let's look at plea bargaining and
Right.
people that are taking plea bargains. When you bring the issue of class into it, and the idea that courts can be used to foster and perpetuate class divisions, I think it is something that particularly a lot of upper middle class white readers, especially, have never thought about. Even people with law degrees have never thought about holy cow, the whole system is set up for, to perpetuate divisions, to make people fail. And that's hard to accept, but I think that that's what I'm trying to sort of establish in the book, and that plea bargaining, a widespread use of plea bargaining, is one of many tactics that is used by the ruling classes to sow class division among the lower classes.
So is this your first book?
So,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was just going to ask. So you approach it from the idea of plea bargaining. Did you get a chance to really dig into the prosecutorial role, or did you just do a broad overview of everything? Because you have mostly done defense work, correct?
Yeah. No, I've never been a prosecutor, and most of my practice has been on the civil side. But I've done a lot of criminal appeals and post conviction, what we call post conviction work. So people that are already locked up. And throughout the course of doing that, I've talked to a lot of people that are incarcerated, and we start talking about like the sort of basis and genesis of their charges and how they ended up behind bars. And a lot of them have taken bad deals that they just thought they had to.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because over the last 200 years, we've developed this culture of this is just what you do, and so it's what you do to get your case processed through the system as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Mm-hmm.
not, it's not a system that is really seeking truth and justice or any of those lofty things that we like to
Talk
think
about.
about. But it's really more of a thing of expediency. Like how many convictions can we secure in the shortest amount of time? How many of these cases can we push through? And we keep getting more and more and more and more. And even as people are aware of the growing criminal justice problems that we've had since the drug wars, really since Prohibition, our incarcerated population continues to increase. Even in places like, even as the violent crime rate goes down, I think the violent crime rate is down something like 40% since the 90s. And the prison population has doubled.
Hmm.
So if you look at a situation like that, like violent crime is down 40%, but the prison population has doubled. Why is that? And it's because we're streamlining this process all the time, making it easier and easier and easier for prosecutors to secure convictions. And so so if they've been told by the courts, if prosecutors have been told by the courts that they can use whatever means necessary to secure a conviction, anything they can think
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
of, they're going to do it.
Yeah.
And
So this legislative session, there's obviously a plethora of bills that are going through both chambers that I find offensive on multiple levels. But there's one bill that came out of the Senate, SB 8. And SB 8, I mean, it is specific. SB 8 would limit the bail project. I mean, it's like a specific organization and other nonprofits that help bail poor people out of jail. The bill would ban the group from receiving taxpayer money like the $100,000 it received from the Central Indiana Community Foundation. It would also require the state certification or limit the not-for-profit to only help 2 people every 180 days. The bill also says clearly bail organizations can only help people facing a misdemeanor. It caps bail payments to $2,000. A 2021 quarterly report shows the group averages $2,130 per client, and the median amount it pays is $1,500. Now, the Bail Project said, we only ask for fairness. If we're going to be called out and we're going to be asked about our decisions in cases, why isn't the bail bondsman? And this struck me because we never go after the gun shop owner when somebody uses a weapon from their store and it's used in a shooting. But now we're saying, hey, you guys are helping people get out of jail, people who are financially distressed in most cases. And we're saying, no, you can only help 2 people. That's it, that's all. How does a bill like this play into your work and the stuff that you discovered while you were creating Pleading Out?
well, it's just wantonly cruel. What possible rationale could there be for a bill like that? I have yet to hear I have yet to hear any good reason for anything like that. There's a couple of these floating through various state legislatures too. I think there's one that's floating around in Kentucky too. And even as more and more Republicans, and this is the thing that I found throughout the course of researching this book, like I interviewed all kinds of people that understand that the criminal justice system is a disaster. I talked to a guy that is he's a former AUSA, a former assistant United States attorney. And he is a red hat wearing MAGA dude. I mean, he understands that this thing is a busted piece of crap that we've got. And, I think for the most part, even the Koch brothers have been, understand that the criminal justice system is a disaster and we don't need to lock more people up. And that's useless and cruel and stupid. And so, you have to wonder what the motivation is because the public doesn't want that.
Right.
The public doesn't want the bail project to stop. And who wants that? Who wants it?
It was really interesting because I hadn't heard about this particular bill. I'd been paying more attention to a couple other bills. And so when I looked at Senate Bill 8 and I saw that it was sponsored by by my own representative. So
your own senator? Yeah.
It's in Senate bill, but the House rep who's sponsoring it is Peggy Mayfield. And it's dismaying because this is not something that I want as a constituent. And so, again, it's that process of saying, this is not what I want. This is not the work that I want you to do. And recognizing that even when I write to her or when I bump into her and tell her that directly, she will likely dismiss my concerns as a voter. It no longer matters.
They don't care. They
No,
don't
No.
care.
no.
And actually, I talked to JD Ford. JD Ford, I interviewed him extensively for this book, believe it or not. He's quoted. I've got a big section from him because I talked to him about the critical infrastructure bill that went through the state legislature in Indiana a couple of years ago. And everybody voted for that. Everybody, all the Democrats voted for it. I'm like, why?
Mm.
Like, why did you guys vote for this? It is a raw giveaway to the oil and gas industry. So I guess maybe that's your answer right there. Um, but anybody who is reading the bill, this is a bill that slaps $100,000 fine on somebody for enabling trespassing. The last I checked, trespassing was already illegal. There's already laws that prohibit trespassing. They passed one in Oklahoma. This ALEC creation, this
Mm-hmm.
Frankenstein's. They passed one in Oklahoma that sets up $1 million fine for somebody who enables trespassing onto critical infrastructure, which is oil and gas industry property. It's like if you're gonna protest a pipeline coming through Indiana, I guess, then you can be fined $100,000 for trespassing. And I'm like, JD, how did this get through? What happened here? And he's like, they just ram and jam this stuff through. And it's like, it's got a good sounding title. And,
Mm-hmm.
we've got the 5,000 bills flying at our faces. And, somebody comes and speaks for 5 minutes about the bill. And it's like, oh, protecting critical infrastructure. Well, that sounds pretty good. Let's get that going. And so SB 8 will pass.
Oh
I mean,
God,
I think
yeah.
there's very little doubt that it's going to pass. And maybe there will be Democratic opposition and maybe not. But as we know, it probably doesn't really matter a whole heck of a lot. But you have to wonder why. There is no popular support for that. There's no
Absolutely.
popular support for it. And then you've got something like medical marijuana that polls at like 80 or 90%.
Can't get it.
No,
All 13
you
bills for
can't get
marijuana.
through.
All
Can't
13
get it through.
bills are dead that were aimed at decriminalizing marijuana at different levels. All of them. Nicole, I want to switch real quick because we know that in the Black and Brown communities, criminal justice reform and the conversations around criminal justice permeate our communities because we are often disproportionately impacted negatively by a lot of the legislation, a lot of the criminal justice. We know this. I posted a video today of the Purdue cop beating up a student. I mean, it was just bad. And one of your roles that you have in the state, because you got a gazillion of them, one of your roles is the new president of the Monroe County Black Caucus. And
Right.
talk about what is the Monroe County Black Caucus, and I assume that a part of it is wanting to get more people involved, Black people involved with the policy making process. But talk about your role and what you guys hope to do in 2022.
Okay. Well, you just summed up the
Oh.
mission statement of the Black Democratic Caucus in like a tiny little sentence. So, congratulations and well done. Um, we first formed the Black Caucus back in 2016, and that was really a result of sitting down with my mother, who is a judge.
Judge.
Yep. And kind of laughing about how we were the only two Black elected officials in Monroe County. And I said, hey, this is our Black Caucus, you know. But it struck me that with the number of elected officials in Monroe County, it should be more than two. We could at least hit our proportion in population and go farther or further. Doesn't matter. The point is, we formed the Black Caucus and started getting people so that we could get more Black people involved in the political process. Not everybody wants to run for office. I recognize that, but that doesn't mean that you cannot be in the rooms and actually have those discussions with your policymakers and elected officials. So that was the goal of the Black Caucus. Now, I just got elected in the last few weeks. So I am working with the amazing steering committee, which includes the immediate past president, William Hosea, the vice president, who's the other Black clerk in Monroe County. She's the county clerk, Nicole Brown. So, I mean, we have a really great team and we're looking at our goals for 2022. But part of it is we have candidates who are coming up in the primaries, and there are several Black candidates. I would like to see some of them get elected to their offices that they're running for. I say some and not all because some of them are running against each other.
Right.
And apparently you can't elect both people. That's the way it
No,
works.
no, it doesn't work.
No,
There's no tie.
no. Yeah, there's no tie in elections, which is unfortunate because we could have some real fun, I think. But so that's what we're looking for. We want to get Black folks on the ballot in office and serving the community because I think we do better when we have greater representation in office. And that's, I mean, it seems pretty obvious to me, but sometimes people struggle with the notion. So that's what we're doing. And I'm really excited.
And I find that I find what that work, because I know that we both also sit on Stonewall, which is our LGBTQ plus caucus. You know, I'm on IDAC, which is the African American caucus of the statewide IDAC. But one of the things that we're seeing now, like the other side, they have like their inaugural DEI class, and you know, blah blah blah. They talk a good game, but they don't have any Black people elected to office. and I'm wondering, or if they do, well, let me say any Black people in the state house. Let me clarify, because they don't have any Black people in the state house. And I'm wondering if we can get more people elected. Can we find a better way to combat pieces of legislation like SB8? Would Monroe, MCBDC, be?
It's a mouthful.
I know, right? would they also champion for legislation or against legislation? Is that something that you guys plan on thinking about doing in the future?
That is one of my goals. I don't want to commit the caucus to doing something that everybody else is not prepared to do, but I think that's important to actually, gather voices together and speak out about things that are going to negatively impact our community.
Absolutely. I love it.
Yeah.
So check this out. 1134, HB 1134, which is the I'm Scared of Brown and Black People Stories in History class. That is actually out of the House and into the Senate. And, it is Black History Month. And I know in Alabama, they had parents calling and complaining that Black History Month and the programs around Black History Month were CRT. I know a lot of people keep talking about, well, that's Alabama, that's not going to happen here. The proof is in the pudding. I do believe this is going to happen. So in the same month that they are saying we don't want to talk about things that make the white kids uncomfortable, because they never really ask Black parents how they feel, or Asian parents, or Hispanic parents, Latino parents. We're in the midst of Black History Month. How do we, and then for you, Dan, there are criminal charges associated with these bills for these teachers, and they could lose their license. How are y'all feeling? And let's just chop it up, right? How are y'all feeling about HB 1134?
Dan, you go first, because if I start going,
Go.
Dana's going to cut us off for the show. So
I don't know. Let's just all talk at the same time.
Oh.
See if we can, like a dueling banjos kind of thing here. I wrote a piece about this for our little regional magazine down here a couple of weeks ago. And I think what's more interesting to me than talking about, whether or not we're going to, and obviously it's interesting to talk about whether or not we're going to pass this thing, although I think it's a foregone conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Like the legislature is going to do whatever it wants. They don't really care what public opinion is. They don't care what the teachers think. They don't care what, certainly don't care what the other side thinks, and I think it's interesting though to think about, where does this stop and who stops them? And so next year, what are we doing next year in the General Assembly? What happens then? Do we outlaw the teaching of slavery entirely? I mean, what is, really, what's not on the table?
Exactly.
At this point,
Exactly.
right?
And
where does it stop? Because the courts are not going to stop them. And we've seen that very distinctly and very obviously, right? It doesn't matter how many appointees Joe Biden rams through in the next, 6 months or whatever. This is not gonna this is not gonna be stopped by the courts. So who stops it?
Right. Who stops it? That's a
I
good
think that's
question.
a great question. Oh, I think that's a great question, and it how do you keep from despairing when you're looking at situations like that? Like when you start looking at the way that our lines are drawn for elections and everything else, and you cannot elect people who are actually part of your community, and we've redrawn it so that everything is weighted in favor of the most conservative,
It's just it actually
restricted view of people.
it,
Yeah, help
it
me on this one.
yeah,
You
I'm gonna
see
say
what
it
I'm
actually
saying?
what it does is it says, okay, we want these voters in this district and we want these voters in this district and we want you to run in this district because we've drawn this district for you to be as successful as you possibly can. And people are always like, well, no, how does that work? Gerrymander, blah blah. There are voting records. They know how
Yeah.
people vote. So they can tell if you voted in the Republican primary or the Democratic primary. So it's not like this is arbitrary because I've heard people say, well, no, it's not gerrymandered. They know because they know where you voted. And the idea that we don't want a government that is representative of all people and that we want a narrow view. And this is the thing that gets me about this is that one, we're not preparing our youth for a future. We're not preparing them to be critical thinkers. I'm sorry, did I say critical? I know they don't like that word. We're not preparing them to be critical thinkers and be able to see nuanced opinions in a nuanced way. But this is actually really harmful to everything about who we are as Indiana. For example, our economy. We know that Intel just decided to put a plant in Ohio versus Indiana because Ohio has a larger number of college graduates than does Indiana. But we're not preparing our students to excel in post-secondary education. We're inhibiting their ability to excel in post secondary education.
I
Well,
think it's
and now,
possible. Oh, I'm sorry.
oh no, go ahead.
No. Well, I was going to say I think it's possible that that's entirely by design. You
Mm,
know, and because I think that you've got a bunch of people in the state house at this point that are hostile to the whole idea of public education.
oh yeah, yeah. I
You
got
Well,
know,
not just public education to education, period. I mean, it seems to be lately that we are rewarding a lack of intelligence. We are not looking for
mm,
intelligence and education in our leaders anymore. We are celebrating ignorance and poo
mm.
pooing science and history and resources and saying that that's somehow bad or not something that we should desire.
well, if
So,
if you need, and this is a lot of what I talk about in the books. Everything goes back to the book.
Right?
Uh,
good.
no, uh, you
Oh, by
need
the
a
way, if you want to pre-order a book and you're watching the show, click the link and you can pre-order my man's book. All right. Sorry, I had to get that plug in there.
if you're in charge in America, you need a pliable, vulnerable, uneducated workforce because those are the folks that are going to eat as much doo doo
As you shovel out of it.
as you want to get. I know, you said we have kids watching. I can't say what I want to say. But these are the folks that are gonna, just show up and do the work and get paid as little as possible and not ask any questions.
Right, right.
So you need an uneducated workforce. America is, I mean, the key to understanding America is that we need people to do as much work as possible for as close to free as possible.
Oh, say that
That's
again. So that we can
that's
we
the
can
rules
Oh,
help.
that
that
are no.
sounds vaguely familiar, but
eh,
they
eh,
might talk about that in critical race
don't see
theory.
if we don't teach you that that was a thing. Then if we do that to you, you won't know it actually happened before.
Didn't we have some
Exactly.
books that called them happy workers?
Something like that. I mean, because
Yeah, I mean,
the Africans that were brought over as cargo, it was the triangular trade. It was they were somebody said that they were migrant workers.
something like
Texas,
that. Yeah.
Texas called them migrant workers.
Yeah.
Well,
Like they
I mean,
can.
Yeah.
I
I mean,
mean,
assume that you're a white person that's totally disinterested in Black history, right? I mean, assume that you just don't care about that. Slavery was a really long time ago. You're never exposed to the history of labor unions for the
ooh,
same
Yeah.
reason. Like, like the bonus army, the burning of veterans camps, and the stuff that was going on in West Virginia, and I like all this other stuff. I didn't learn about that stuff till I was in my 30s. I don't think I never heard about it. So we're not getting any of the history of working class people at all. Um, and it's. I mean, I think that best case scenario for this General Assembly is that all the teachers get super pissed off and walk off the jobs. And then they can say, well, look what an abysmal failure public
Mm-hmm.
education is. We
Mm-hmm.
better just turn everything over to private enterprise.
Absolutely. But if you don't make enough money to send your kid to that private school, then your kid is going to be warehoused somewhere else. And that's
Yeah.
the part that people are not thinking about. Yet, over 1 million students are in public schools, but that's where you want to keep stealing money from. There's another bill out there that's switching chambers where if the community has said, "Yo, our public schools don't have enough resources, we're going to put a referendum on the ballot and raise some tax money to give to our public schools." There's a bill out there right now that says they have to share that money with charter schools. It starts at charter schools, but it's going to parochial schools that don't let they don't like gay people, and it's going to the private schools who get to pick and choose which students that come in there. But the idea that as parents are saying we want to raise money for our people, for our schools, and then there's people coming and go, "Oh, you get more money, we get more money."
Yeah.
Well, okay, all right.
Yeah, there's nothing to say after that. You said it, and we're just kind of like, yeah.
Pretty much. I mean, it's office. But then I did have a question. You mentioned something I thought was really interesting, and you said white folks are not necessarily interested. What made you become interested? Because you're a straight white dude. And let's be from Southern Indiana. Let's just put this out there, right? And we,
I was, yeah, I was fortunate enough to be I mean, everything that's happened to me is because I was in the right place at the right time. Everything good that's ever happened to me, I just lucked out. And I had friends in high school who were gay and who were black. And I think, one of the first experiences I ever had, and I've written about this. I lived in Los Angeles for a couple of years. I dropped out of high school and went to Los Angeles to be a musician for a couple of years. And I did that for a while. And one of the guys I hung out with was a much older black guy, guitar player, and just taught me a lot about how the world works. And I didn't believe it, right? I'm 17, 18, and he's telling me about the history of what's going on in the country, and I'm like, man, I don't know. It kind of seems like black folks are always beating up on white people. I don't know. Like
I hear that
it
all the
seems
time.
like yeah, it seems like the black people are the really violent ones, which is something that I honestly and earnestly believed at 17. you know, and it seems ridiculous now, but I think that like there are plenty of like sheltered white kids that grow up in white neighborhoods and don't have any contact with anybody else that genuinely believe that and also believe that they're not racist, and they're gonna eat what they're fed, right? And I was that kid, and we got stopped by LAPD
Hmm.
one night, and this is like after he's been telling me and telling me and telling me, like I'm like, okay, Phil, whatever, and because I'm 17 and I know everything,
Right? Don't you always know
and
everything at 17?
yeah, and we get stopped by LAPD, who was looking for two other guys, like a white guy walking with a black guy, you know, blocks away from us. But that we fit the bill. So like five cop cars, and this is the 90s, right? This is
Mm. Mm-hmm.
95, 94, 95, like right around the time of the OJ decision, right? I was in LA for that. But these guys surround us and put us in handcuffs, and they kind of just like politely set me over to the side and like, "Are you okay? All right, good." And then they are shaking my man down, for 30 minutes and screaming in his face and just hassling him. And I mean, I just, I mean, I saw it right then and there.
And you
And
didn't
then I
think it
was,
was just a one-off? Because that's the other thing we always hear. Well, it's an isolated incident.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I did. I don't know. But I was able to sort of connect it with the things that he was telling me about race in America,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
plant some seeds that grew from there. And I was lucky enough to, continue to get educated. I think even still for years after that, I was probably what you would call well, at least in my mind, a horrible racist, because I just didn't know anything
Mm.
about
Anybody
about
else?
black folks in America. Yeah, I mean, I just didn't know. Any of that history that we've been talking about for the entire hour, any of the stuff that they're trying to keep kids from knowing right now, didn't know any of that. And as I started to read more and started to learn more, and I was fortunate enough to like want to get an education and to, have been raised by a mom that values education and cares about that stuff, and so I dug into more of that. I went to law school and dug into it more and more. And I was lucky enough to have those experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Mm-hmm.
one of the most insidious lies, and it touches on all the stuff that we've been talking about all night long. One of the most insidious and popular lies that has happened in the last few years, because college is so damned expensive,
Right.
is this idea that, well, listen, college is not for everybody, which, okay, fine. You don't want to go, don't go. But everybody's got a stake in an educated society.
Right.
Like I get that somebody can go and learn to be a carpenter or a plumber or something like that. But I want, when the plumber shows up to my house, I want to be able to talk about politics and philosophy and all that stuff.
Yes.
Like everybody's got a stake in an educated society. And so and you hear it from Democrats, you hear it from the left all the time. Well, college is not for everybody, but education is for everybody.
Absolutely.
And
Now, I will
it's
say
so
one thing
important.
that they do on the left. Hold on, one thing they do on the left, because I'm on there, is that we do talk about the trade schools, and that is education. I believe the trade schools it is education, and it instill, because bottom line is, I'm not an electrician. I'm just not. And I'm
Yeah.
not gonna go messing around, become a crispy critter because I done something wrong. So I
No one
need
Or a
disagrees with that.
plumber.
No
or
one
Dana
disagrees with
Black,
that.
not a plumber.
listen. Don't be on here telling our business. My goodness, this is not what this show's about. I don't just what the heck's going on with
You
you?
know, I was going to touch on something that Dan said because Dan, you wrote an open letter to President Biden that was on, I don't remember which
Bring your mic closer.
website it was, but you had a. Can you remind me what that was?
Oh, well, let's see. That's up on the Medium page and also got published by the Leo down here, which is the
Yeah.
weekly. Yeah.
And so I read that letter, and there was definitely it was humorous. I understood, please reduce student debt because people can buy my book.
Yep.
But running through it also, I think, and I've seen it from other people recently, is the idea of we're paying a ton for education and you need people to be educated. So I appreciated it. I appreciated the humor. I sent it to a whole bunch of people. And I struggle with this that people are mortgaging themselves before they're
Mm-hmm.
even 22 years old. I mean, there's
Mm-hmm.
some people who are talking about graduating from undergraduate or from graduate school if they are so lucky with hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe not, let's say tens of thousands of dollars.
Either way,
And
starting off in the
they're
hole is starting off in the hole.
and they're locked in, and then people are like, well, you shouldn't have borrowed so much money. Well, we're also telling our students and our kids as a society, this is what you need to be successful.
What?
So
And to top that off, Nick, we're talking about generational wealth. People who have generational wealth don't need to get student loans. And so
no,
we tell everybody pull themselves up by their bootstraps, but I gotta go get me a boot with some straps. Right? So I
You're
mean,
gonna pay. You're gonna pay one way or the other.
right.
For law
yeah,
students that are coming out, and I know you know this, Nicole. I mean, for law students that come out now, if you graduate with $100,000 worth of debt, are you gonna go be a public defender? Are you gonna go and work at the Legal Aid Society? If so, you're gonna eat a lot of ramen, and you're
yeah,
never gonna pay off your $100,000 debt. And
And
a
that's gonna
lot
cause
more
health problems
attractive.
that you can't afford to pay.
Yeah, a lot more of an attractive prospect might be to go and work at a defense firm that pays you $100,000 a year or more to defend Walmart in employment actions or to defend the oil and gas industry or to do, so you're going to pay.
Yep.
You're going to
which
pay one
brings
way
it
or the
back
other.
to not having enough people who are actually representing the poor people in court, and they need more lawyers.
And
They need
hence
more
they end up
lawyers
Oh,
for
having
public
to
defenders. They need more prosecutors, and then they end up plea bargaining.
pleading
I
out.
want, we're gonna,
They end up pleading out, and they streamline the
plead
system.
out.
Come on. Did I tell y'all can click on the link and pre-order his book? Did I say that? Click on the link, pre-order my man's book. But this is, I mean, it's
I pre-ordered it already. I'm crazy excited, but I'm impatient because, I like to read it as soon as
I
I
am
get it.
driving it to your house. I am going to drive it to your house.
Thank you. It's up in Bloomington. It's not that far. You can bring some Girl Scout cookies too.
I will totally do that.
Let me know when you bring in the
Always
Girl
up for a
Scout
trip to
cookies, because
Mormon.
I ain't gonna be there when you bring the Girl Scout cookies. I'm gonna be somewhere where there's a treadmill, because honey, me and COVID still over here fighting. But there's so much that we see that impacts our society. A lot of it is based on policies that are being presented at every level of government, and we see that there's an apathy. We get burnt out. Like even on MSNBC, I get tired of hearing the same two stories every day. January 6th and how stupid Donald Trump was. January 6th, I get tired. So I want to hear some nuanced stuff. Tell me about what's happening in Florida, where they're passing crap bills. And even then, when we start hearing about these things, now we can start galvanizing people, because everybody has a different, passion, a political, thing that gets them going. But if you don't hear about them, then you don't
got to do bottom up. I mean, it's got to be bottom up.
Yes.
That's the whole. And again, it's such a great book. I cover this extensively.
Is it a great
book?
You
do say so yourself.
No. Trust me.
I trust you, Dan.
You think it's such a boring topic, plea bargaining, 300 pages on plea bargaining. Never, Canon. No, really, seriously. No, I mean, one of the most rewarding things I got to do was to interview criminal justice organizers, and that's the whole last chapter of the book. And the reason for doing that is because, there have been law professors screaming about plea bargaining and every other policy issue under the sun for, as long as there have been law professors. This has been an issue like critical race theory, like anything else, that's been out there for, a really long time. And no one cares.
Right.
And it's like, because the prescriptions for changing something like this are always like, well, if we could only get in and pass some laws to change the entire structure of the American law system, then we'd be fine. And that's not going to happen. I mean, it's like you can write all the bills you want, and if they never get passed, it doesn't matter. So the top-down change is not going to, we got to stop looking at that.
Yeah, I agree.
And start looking more at, like, how do we organize a mass of people to do something that actually makes change?
So I got Miguel Hampton as watching the show, and I love how much I love MH. I think we all like Gully. He says if our jail system wasn't an economic system, we wouldn't need as many defenders, and if we weren't using it as a feeder system for private prisons, then we probably wouldn't need so many. But everybody deserves a fair, affordable defense, no matter what the case is. We watching you, Gully. We see you. But the other thing you touched on, everybody being bottom up. I had a conversation at my job the other day where it's Black History Month, so they want to pull out MLK quotes, and honestly, it's cool. It was a quote I hadn't heard about all of us coming together and everybody being together. But see, even though it was one of his quotes, I don't necessarily agree with it totally, because when you get everybody, in my opinion, when you get everybody in the same boat, everybody has their own agenda. So they stick their oar in the water, and we're never going anywhere because everybody's paddling in a different direction. I think we ought to go, when you say your bottom-up approach is more like, you know what, I think everybody can be going in the same direction if we get in our own boats. And I don't mean that in a negative way. What I mean is, if you find whatever it is that you're focused on and you go forth. And if you ain't got a boat, I'm in my boat, but I'm gonna help you get yours. And the reason why I say that is because before we had 180,000 channels to watch, before we had the internet, before we had attention spans no more than 256 characters, everything was localized. You didn't really know what was going on in Sacramento, in Indianapolis. Hell, you barely knew what was going on in Indianapolis if you were in Bloomington. Mm-hmm. And so you were able to get focused on what your community needed because you didn't have all those other distractions. times are different. And I think a part of it is because of how technology has changed, how we communicate. I mean, i.e., I have a weekly show on for free, right? I mean, I don't have the same million viewers, but nobody has the same viewer audience because we're all segmented out. But I think if we
Hold on, are we not getting paid for this?
oh no. Oh no
Oh,
no
I
no
got
no
paid.
no.
Did you
Oh
not?
no.
Oh, wow.
No. This is a
Okay.
no budget show. It's a no budget show. But I mean, I get that we all want to combine some of our efforts. But I think when we combine too many efforts, we get pulled and we get distracted. I know that all of us have worked on projects before, and we've all heard of scope creep, right? You start adding stuff to your project, you're gonna get scope creep, and you're never gonna get done with your project.
Yeah.
But we all get in our boats and we all go the same direction. But you be doing your thing in your boat, I'm gonna do my thing in my boat, and we just all get to the finish line together. What y'all think about that theory?
I thought it was a very extended.
I can't hear you. What you say?
I said I thought it was pretty extended to get to that point.
It wasn't like y'all was trying to cut me off.
Like I was like, okay, I get you now. I follow you. But for a minute, I was like, this is, But I don't think anybody disagrees with that notion. You're going to pick a focus and go with it. And there are times when it overlaps, and there are times when they wildly diverge. That's okay. But I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but I think what Dan was saying is we have to have a bottom-up approach, and all of us be focused on that. Doesn't mean people can't do other things. I think you're both agreeing. You just
Just saying it different ways. And I'm actually highlighting what he's saying, right? I'm actually he's saying bottom up, and there's a way to be focused in the bottom up, right?
Yeah.
You can't have a bottom up when everybody is again paddling in different directions.
Listen,
Yeah.
I am a writer, and I love long, tortured metaphors. The longer and more tortured, the better. And I mean, I just think that if you look at, all I'm saying is you look across the board, you look at state legislatures, you look at Congress, you look at the courts, especially, because that's just sort of where I'm focused. That's my wheelhouse. They're not going to help us. Where is salvation in any of those things? And we've been taught, especially lawyers have been taught that that's how you get change made. Is you go from the top down, you get on the inside of the institution, and you do these great things. And I just think we're at a moment now historically where we need to realize that that's not
It
going
doesn't
to
work
work.
that way. But none of our great societal changes ever came from the top down. None of
That's
them.
right.
If you don't ever study what the suffrage movement was about and those women going to Seneca Falls, that wasn't a top down. That was definitely a bottom up. Now, granted, some of those women were highly influential and they didn't really care about brown and black women, but they were singularly focused. They were focused on, look, let me just get women to vote and y'all worry about y'all later. And whether or not we like the approach or not, some of us don't like it, but they were focused. And because they were focused on what it was that they were trying to do, now other people can come behind them and say, okay, well, white women got to vote. Black women want to vote too. Black men want to vote. Could we not kill people when they try to go to the polls? So there's like you get one thing and you build on it. I don't know. That's just, I think people spend too much time focusing at the top as well because it's noisy and shiny and pretty and orangey or whatever.
Easy.
Reading the bill is hard for people. Reading
Yeah.
the Senate, we talked about several bills, and you guys both talked about when you read that bill, people don't. It's longer than 256 characters. They're not gonna do that.
The legislators don't read it. The
No.
legislators don't read it. That was the whole point of the passage with J.D. Ford is that they're just ramming this stuff through. I talked to Attica Scott, who's
I love
the
her.
only, Attica, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
I've had her on the
I
show.
talked to her about the same thing. Same thing in Kentucky, right? There's a few people reading this stuff, but it's mostly just, all right, well, is this another, like ALEC giveaway? Whatever. We're just going
I
to
have
sign off.
a new terminology for that acronym, ASLIC and Executive Committee. I'm sorry, but go ahead.
Oh my God. What will the children who are watching this program say?
They'll think it's a donkey joke.
Oh, you're right. No, you're right. That's right.
It's a
That's right.
donkey-
Good.
I'm just
They love
saying,
they
but
love
you're
kids
right.
today
They're not
love
even.
Trek, right? It's a thing that they're way
Yeah.
into donkeys. Or no, there's donkeys in Encanto. So my kids love the donkeys in Encanto. Yeah,
Oh.
there's like
Oh
It's
yeah,
there's
the
unicorn
movie.
donkeys.
Okay, yeah, the
Yeah,
movie. I did. I had to
yeah.
think about it for a minute, and apparently that's a hot movie. I haven't seen it yet, but I will.
It is very hot in my house. I'll tell you that much.
The
They
kids
love
love it.
Encanto.
I love it.
Yeah.
So as we, are getting down to the last few minutes of the show, I wanted to ask, we've kind of touched on a few issues, education and the criminal justice system. Talk about what is actually like got y'all fired up, like over the last 6 months or whatever it is. Whatever. Let's just, I mean, Nicole, you and I have like heated conversations about a whole bunch of stuff all the time.
Mhm.
What's got you fired up?
Right now, I'm really focused on the 2022 elections and what's going to happen next because we need to get more Democrats elected to office. That's all there is to it. And I don't think that I know we have a big tent and not everybody thinks the same way, but I'm genuinely scared at the imbalance in our state. Um, and I would like to see more people who are actually doing good work so that we're not talking about 1134 turned upside down as hell. I mean, it's just not okay. So that's what I'm looking at. And I recognize that it's going to be a lift, but that's what I want to see.
I
More
love it.
Democrats.
What you got, Dan?
Oh, I mean, I don't know. I think I'm experiencing a little bit of outrage fatigue, like everybody else right now.
What?
I am really encouraged by. I will say this first. I'm really encouraged by my law students.
Mm.
I get to interact with them, every day, and they are smart and they're focused and they understand the world way better than my generation did when we graduated from law school. So, and they're all on board with, ideas that, maybe like half of my class thought was crazy at the time. It's just like this sort of accepted thing that, you know, all the institutions in America are founded on white supremacy, for example, like that kind of thing is like, they get it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm encouraged by that. Um, I think I've been stuck sort of in thinking about disaster relief
Mm-hmm.
after the tornadoes blew through Western Kentucky
Mm-hmm.
and Illinois. And so I've known a lot of students and a lot of people that have been affected by that. And, thinking about all the implications of, you know, um, what what disaster relief really looks like, whose pockets are getting lined as a result of that kind of disaster, as a
Mm.
result of COVID-19, as a result of, and stuff that looks good on the outside but isn't really good,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's sort of dressed up like a good thing. And that's sort of what I've been interested in. I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to write the next book about.
I love it. I'm glad that you're thinking about writing another book. That's
Yeah,
dope. Nick, when
yeah.
your book coming out?
Oh, never. I am not a writer, I am a reader. So that is why I sit there and I'm very, very lucky to know several wonderful authors. And I just like to read the things that they produce because they are amazing.
Yeah.
So, and I
How-
Yeah.
count Dan in that group. So I will
Thank you.
read
How
it.
do you have time to read with everything that you do?
You are
Did you
asking
see
the wrong.
Dan's face?
You are asking the wrong
Um,
question. Real talk. Real talk. We're on vacation, and we're hanging out at the beach, and we've been together 24 hours. So we hanging out the whole time, and we're laying out on the beach and sunbathing and all of this stuff. At the end of the vacation, she says, "Well, I finished 4 books." When did you have time to finish 4 books? We were together the whole time.
Yeah.
I think
And
I got one paragraph in of the book that I took to the beach with me. I Man, yeah, she's got, I don't know. She reads them in her sleep, I guess. I don't know.
it really is incredible, especially considering, Nicole, how high maintenance everything seems in your life, if you know what I mean.
I do. I do. I love my job. It's great. And I like working with the state party and with the Black Caucus and the Good Trouble Network and some of
Sure.
the other groups that I'm
Stonewall.
part
Don't
of.
you forget Stonewall.
It's Stonewall. You know, they have a new secretary. Stepped down as secretary this week, but I am still
Keith
very
Potts,
active on
councilman.
the board. So, but I do love to read. So that's one of those things that I make time for
Oh my
when I
God.
can. So it is very much a part of what I need and do. Also, I read before I go to sleep. So that's
See, reading
it's
sometimes puts me to sleep. So, if
oh no no no
I,
reading.
I try. I'm a documentary person. So I'm an auditory learner. I recognize that. I used to, thanks to you and the whole entire family, y'all don't make me feel bad because I don't read book after book after book. But I'm an auditory learner, so I don't read as many books. But I give them to Nicole
Well,
now and
but
read
you
that for
also
me.
read a lot of bills. So if I want to know something about a bill that's coming out of the House or the Senate, I'm going to call you and say, "Have you read any of the bills that I should pay attention to?" So it all
Yeah,
works out.
I like articles. I do like articles. I like fact based. Give me the quick and dirty. And then if I need to research something on top of that to understand what it means, I'll do that. And so my reading usually is a building kind of thing, versus giving me a 300-page book and say, "Here, have at it." You know,
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure this one is going to be excellent because Dan
because it's
is a
Dan.
very engaging writer. Like he wrote about, uh, no, it wasn't post-traumatic stress syndrome. It was secondary syndrome,
Yeah,
secondary
secondary.
trauma syndrome. Is
Yeah,
that
yeah,
right?
secondary traumatic stress. I
That's
guess
it.
there's no disorder. Yeah, in the PT, sorry, the whatever you call it. I'm
DSMV.
fluttering out the DSM. Yeah, there's no D there.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah,
But it was, and you would think like reading about trauma and how people stress out, particularly as lawyers, when they're looking at crime scene photos and along over
Mm.
time, you would think that that would be something that would be depressing or you just want to put it away in terms of reading. But I was absolutely glued to the page, well, screen in that particular case. But it was fascinating and it resonated. I related to some of it. And um, so he's a very, very good writer. And some of the things that you would think would be dry are not. So I'm
I
really
love it.
looking forward to the book
I
because that's
love it.
going to be
Well,
something different.
you're very kind. Thank you very much.
well, I'm gonna get me a copy because and I want it signed by you. I
I
want a
thought
DC on somewhere.
I thought we agreed that my daughters were going to sign it because I think that's what's actually going to increase it in value.
So you
You
gonna tell
know,
me what I want?
Yes.
no, I would not dare
Listen.
do
I
such a
baited
thing.
you. I suckered you.
It's your show after all. I
I suckered you, my man. All
no
right, Dan
no no.
Cannon.
You can do no wrong on this show.
Oh no, I
Oh,
just suckered you. What? Yes, dear.
I forgot to mention one thing because I was talking about Stonewall.
Mm-hmm.
And coming up on February 19th is Stonewall's first annual Love is Love fundraiser. And so it's going to be great. We've got some incredible speakers. We've got Malcolm Kenyatta. We've got Rosemary Ketchum. It is going to be great. So people should come and join us and support Stonewall.
I love it.
That's
I
my
love
little
it.
plug. Sorry.
I love it. That's great. And speaking of Stonewall, we sent a letter or a public records request over to the State House because they are supporting HB 1041. I applaud my caucus for continuing the fight. If you guys don't know what 1041 is, it bans trans girls from participating in sports. And it's specific to just trans girls. There's nothing about trans boys. There's and the organizations that are pushing this. So I applaud Senator Ford and all the folk who continue to offer equity and equality to marginalized communities. I don't understand how people literally can write legislation that is not just harmful in the sense that they think they're managing fair play, but they're literally codifying in legislation that as a trans person you don't matter. Your who you are as a human just doesn't matter. We're gonna write it down and put it in law. And they heard it in the committee yesterday. It's another one of those bills that's coming out. And the trauma that is going to be caused to those trans youth. I sit on the board of Trinity Haven, the only LGBTQ plus centered residence for LGBTQ plus youth who are at risk of being homeless. And we know those youth and increasingly our trans youth are at a greater risk of harm, homelessness, and now we're writing into Indiana statute that they do not matter. Their existence should be dismissed. And I applaud my caucus. So this fundraiser is to support candidates who would oppose such things and believe that every person, I mean, if you're a tax-paying parent and you are sending your trans kid to school and they've decided to transition at whatever, because IHSAA already has rules for at what point you've decided to transition, but you're paying taxes and your kid can't participate, are you going to get a refund? No, because your money is going to a charter school, a parochial school, in the form of a voucher. So no, you're not getting your money. All right, Indiana's own Dana Black. Dan Cannon, thank you so much for coming on. We'll do this again. Maybe we bring on Gully, because I know he down there having a good time. Right? That would be a dope convo. Good luck. Y'all, pre-order his book. I'm so proud of my man. He's doing great work. He's another example where you don't have to be an elected official to have an impact on your community. And he is doing just that, raising those beautiful daughters. Nicole Bolden, I'm not saying goodbye because I'm going to talk to you later anyway.
Yeah, okay.
But thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it, and keep the work up. And don't overload yourself. You won't have time to read those books.
That will never happen. I will encourage people to not only pre-order Dan's book, but also if you want to support the Monroe County Black Democratic Caucus, I believe Dana has dropped the link for our Act Blue account. You can donate. We'll take it.
Absolutely.
And we'll get more Black officials elected in Monroe County.
Absolutely. And there's always room for more in the tent. If you're not really sure what you can do to contribute to this policy making process, reach out to anybody you see on this panel, because we can tell it's all about what you enjoy and what you like to do, and finding a way to infuse that into the policy making process. You don't have to have any special skills, because the Orange Menace was the president for 4 years. And I guarantee your intelligence level is significantly superior to his. All right, Indiana's own Dana Black. I will holler at y'all next week. Peace.
Thank you all so much.
Turn Left is the property of Black Pearl IT Solutions. Executive producer, Indiana's own Dana Black. Music by www.bensound.com.